Hey, Blue Bear.
Okay, the channel is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Watching 100 Movies. I'm Christiana Ellis,
Mike Mateen.
and this is our second update for our 2025 Oscar movie marathon. Here to talk more about what movies we've seen since the last update and dive deep into the ones that we've now both seen. So, whoop, that was my phone's alarm to remind me that it was time to check to see if it was time to start the podcast. Turns out it is. So, the movies that we now have on the agenda to discuss in detail, we have two of the best animated features, Inside Out 2 and Flow, that we can now both get into, and one of the best picture and the most nominated film this year, Emilia Perez. Um, do you want to jump into that one first? It's kind of like maybe the biggest topic, just notoriety wise.
Yep. And then we also end on the more fun ones.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't want to necessarily presume, but uh, yeah, so I think folks who listened to the previous updates will recall that I was fairly, like, I didn't get too much into detail, but the short version was I think it does some interesting stuff, but mostly I was pretty unhappy with it. Um, but now that you've seen it, what was your take?
I mean, very similar. Like it, I don't know. Like I think I just wrote this down how I described it. So I've already thought of it. So let me just pull my own words up.
Sure.
Where's my notes here? Sorry, I should have done
It
this
is
before.
certainly a movie that I think invites the viewer to spend some time thinking about what you could possibly compare it to.
Yeah, because that's what I was trying to do. So I basically wrote it's like one main through storyline,
Mm,
but it feels like it has like 10 subplots, right?
mm-hmm.
And it's like it feels like it's just trying to do too much. Like you go from like is the movie trying to say like if you try to summarize all of it into like what is it saying? Like you could land on, hey, if you're a really bad person, but maybe it's because like something's just not feeling right. Like in this case, you know, the mobster felt like he wanted to be a woman and that he should be a woman, and so by transitioning and getting into your kind of happy state, became a really good person and then started giving back because now everything was feeling good. But that could lead to problems with your ex-wife and family when you try to reintegrate into your family without telling them what you did that could eventually get you killed.
Hmm. Well, so I
Which
think
like it's so many weird
right.
pieces.
I
Like
so the I think it's worth noting about this movie where the main plot is about a transgender woman that they've decided in this movie that supposedly is attempting to try to increase representation and tell a compassionate, nuanced story about a transgender woman. And what they did is chose to first depict them like, first, we're going to tell a story about a rich criminal. We're going to portray them first. We're going to first see them as a scary looking gangster. And then we're going to explicitly introduce the question of, well, can you ever really change who you are? And then ultimately decide the answer is, well, you can try and you can get pretty far, but ultimately it will all still come back to bite you. And so,
you did a much more eloquent job of saying what I just said,
well,
right?
I've
You
thought
know?
about
Yeah.
it a fair amount.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
that is
I,
kind of what I described,
yeah, it
right?
is.
Like,
It is. But I
yeah.
guess the point is just like in presenting it that way, I don't think it's any wonder that transgender people hungry for representation in movies are not thrilled with this one.
I can see that. Yeah.
Um, and so it's not that the performance isn't good. The actress does a fine job. Um, I don't know that I would have said best actress nomination, but it's not that the performance is bad. She's doing what the script requires. Of course, she is extremely unlikely to win at this point due to all of the
Going off script.
yes, going
Yeah.
off script social media stuff, which is just further like, what are we doing here? But yeah, but so even just like it's just such a strange project to try to like to choose this story to tell and to say that it's a musical and then it's a French filmmaker deciding to set a story like in Mexico without really consulting a lot of people who know about either drug cartels and or Mexico or transgender people. But then they kind of want to just pat themselves on the back for making a progressive movie, except that it's really kind of not any of those things.
Correct.
Um, it has some interesting numbers. I think there's some good performances in it for what the script requires of them. But boy, it's a mess, and to the extent that it succeeds in saying anything at all, it's saying things that are bad. Um, I think it's a bad movie. It's a bad movie that does some interesting things. That's
Yes.
my take. So if folks recall the sort of metaphor that I presented was like you go out to a restaurant that you've been told is highly regarded, and they serve you a whole bunch of things, and some of them taste okay, but a lot of them are very strange. But then you get food poisoning at the end of the night. So, like, do you like that restaurant? Well, no, I did not like that restaurant.
Yeah.
Um, but I will say, like, maybe we could just touch briefly on what it is nominated for and kind of like reflect
Yep.
on. So it's Best Picture, obviously, Best Director, Best Actress for Carla Sofia Gascon, who is the um, wait she I'm suddenly blanking. Is Emilia Perez is the like she is the title character, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. She's the
Okay.
title character.
For some,
Yeah.
I was just second guessing myself about that. That was her name as opposed to like one of the other characters' names because like Zoe Saldana is also in it, um, relevant because she is nominated as Best Supporting Actress. Um, I'm not wrong that she started having the tilde pronounced in her name semi recently, right? I don't think she used to be introduced as Zoe Saldana, but she is now. And you do say it's spelled that way now, but I don't think it used to be. Not that that's a problem. I mean, obviously, it's fine. It's her name. She can have it be whatever she wants. But I was just like surprised to see it. Anyway, but yeah, so she's also nominated for Best Supporting Actress. The Best Adapted Screenplay for the screenwriter, who's also the same person as the director. It's the Best International Feature Film from France, despite it being, about and set in Mexico. Best Original Score, two Best Original Songs for El Mal and Mi Camino. And then Best Cinematography, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Best Sound, Best Film Editing. Um, I don't think it should win any of those. Um,
So the only place I would potentially disagree, I would be okay if one of the two songs won. I like.
yeah, I will agree. Like, and of the songs, I think those are the best two. Um,
Yes. I
El
had a lot of fun with El Mal.
Yeah. I will I so El Mal was one where I really liked it in the moment because you're really kind of swept up in the specific emotion that she's singing about, which is this idea that, like, oh, everybody in this room is actually like a huge hypocrite who's contributed to all of these people who've gone missing and kidnappings and so on in Mexico. But now, for their own prestige, they're donating a bunch of money to a charity that's about like finding all those people. And so she's like relishing in this idea of like, I'm making you actually finally pay for what you did, and that what in kind of this indirect way. And so I think it is a fun song. I think the choreography is a little like jarring, but the song is fun, I think. But it
I
is,
I enjoyed the choreography.
you know, I
With
I I I I had mixed feelings about it. I liked pieces of it, but I felt like it was just jumping around so much that it was distracting in the end. But I like the setting, like like at the lights kind of go down in this sort of like gala where everyone's at the tables, and Zoe Saldana is kind of dancing around them, like like they're not aware of what she's doing.
yeah,
I liked the set piece of it. Um, I think that like it is one of those moments though where you could kind of take a step back to say like, well, at a certain point though, like I don't know how I, I don't know. I don't know how I feel ultimately maybe about the just the broader story in this, like how does that piece actually fit in terms of like the ethics of what's really going on here.
well, I agree. This was like one of the parts of the movie where I was like, okay, so now we're like an anti-trafficking movie. Like
Mhm.
what? Like what?
Yeah.
This is a different movie. Like this is a different movie than the movie we started with, and it's a
Right.
different movie we finished with. You know,
Yeah, and
like
and also like for as righteous as she's feeling in that song, we could also just kind of say, aren't you the one helping a drug kingpin escape their history of crime? And you decided to do it and help keep their secret because she's paying you a lot of money? Isn't that what you're doing right now? But I think there's nuance to it, but it is just one of those where it's like the ethical lines are not as clear as she would like them to be in that number. But it's a good song. I think it's a good song. And then Mi Camino is it's Selena Gomez, right? That's her song.
yep, yep,
She is an interesting character that gets more nuance than you would expect because at the beginning she seems kind of awful. She just seems like she's very shallow, um, and the sort of person who would marry a drug kingpin and sort of act like she doesn't know that it's all illegal. Like she's just some ordinary, like housewife of like what are those? Not Desperate Housewives, but like the Real Housewives reality
yep.
shows, right? Like she acts like that's the kind of wife she is when she's actually like out in the desert with a with a drunk kingpin, and then later moving in. So like I don't even really want to get into the whole plot of it, but like she ends up being kind of an interesting character. But then she's singing this song, um, talking about her finally kind of getting to a point after a lot of a journey to try to get some actual self-actualization of her own and like realize, wait, I am a person who wants and feels things and I can do something about that.
Right.
Which she had kind of not had much agency or apparent interest in having agency before that. Um, so, but yeah, but the song itself is just kind of about finally getting to feel your own feelings and stuff, and kind of the freedom of that, which it's a fun bouncy song. So like I guess I agree. I would certainly say of the songs in the movie, those are the two best. Um, I think maybe I'm just biased against the movie more broadly, and also because I saw Sing Sing, um, and Like a Bird is a very good song. as well, and I like that movie a lot more. Sing Sing, just because I don't know that we'll get a chance to talk more about it, is about the um, rehabilitation through the arts program in Sing Sing prison. So it's about these guys who are part of that program, and rehearsing for and then putting on plays within the prison system, and it's really good. Highly recommended. Um, but yeah, so I don't know. Do I I I'm never been a sort of person who wants to go on and on about stuff that I don't like as much. Sometimes I'll get into a little bit of a rant, but I'm almost always more interested in talking about things that I enjoy than things that I didn't.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I want to make sure I did feel like the songs,
Hmm.
those two songs were the best. I when I didn't remember which songs had been nominated, and I couldn't remember if the one where they're like where like the missing kids sing and stuff was
Mm,
going to be one of them. And that one, while it's kind of feels like a decent song, like that one's weird. And this is just one of those, like, this is by no means meant to be like a sound like a humble brag or whatever, but it's like there are times in movies like this, because I speak Spanish, that but I don't speak it well enough to watch the movie just in Spanish,
mm-hmm,
right? But there are parts where, especially in songs, where especially when there's like repetitive stuff and like
mm-hmm,
I and like really know what they're saying, and it's just like when it's like grammatically like shifted because it makes more sense in English to put the subtitles a different thing. It's like super like jarring for me.
mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, that's not what they're saying. Like, it is what they're saying, but that's like that's not those are not those words,
Yeah.
right? And I get it because it's done in a song way and it like sounds kind of grammatically incorrect if they just write it the way that they're saying it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There was a number of parts in this movie where that kind of happened. Like, it wasn't a lot. Like, it wasn't
So,
enough to like me to not like the movie, but it was like there were some weird parts where it's like that's not what they said,
mm-hmm.
but like
I
it's
mean,
huh?
I speak little
Yeah.
bits of Spanish, certainly not as much as you do, and but so I didn't want to like speak on this topic per se, but it's my understanding that, for example, in Mexico especially, there was a lot of criticism about its use of the Spanish language in this movie. Um, and I know that, for example, Selena Gomez's character was called out, especially for not like speaking like a toddler, was what one review said. But in my actual take though, is like I don't know that her character was supposed to be a native Spanish speaker.
Right. So that criticism then would make a lot of sense, because it's why I was able to, because not that I speak like a toddler, but my vocabulary is probably closer to a toddler's, right?
Mm,
Like, I can speak it, I can understand it. And so if they're dumbing it down or making it sound like a toddler, like, I'm probably understanding it better, which then of course, like, just naturally, like, the translation's going to be off a
yeah.
little.
Well,
And that's
so
not even wrong with translation. That's just how those things work, right? Like, you have to
I
make
think
it
that
with the timing.
criticism
Yeah.
was about her character in particular, but also just I think there was just general conversation that like there was a meme going around that a couple of trans actresses from Mexico decided to make their own movie where shoot, let me see if I can find it, because it's basically they're making fun of this French director coming in and making a movie that he doesn't really know anything about. Um, I think I can find it quickly here. Um, yeah, here it is. So a group of Mexicans responded to Emilia Perez by creating a short film titled Johann Sacre Bleu, a French inspired film on France made entirely without a French cast or crew. The idea to make a tongue in cheek response musical full of French stereotypes started out as a joke online, but quickly gained traction amongst Mexican social media users who organized themselves to create the short film as a counterpart to Emilia Perez. a film that tries to depict Mexican social problems, but failed by including no nuanced knowledge or investigation on the subject. The movie was created by Mexican trans woman Camila Aurora through crowdfunding, and it tells the story of a trans woman, heiress to the biggest baguette producer, who falls in love with Arturo Ratatouille, trans heir to the biggest croissant company in France. And I found that social media post right away by searching Emilia Perez baguette. So anyway, but yes, so I wonder if it will win much, because I think there was some early buzz that maybe just because it had won some of the other awards, like, you know, Golden Globes, etc., and then it had the most nominations, that it was maybe, you know, an early sort of front runner. But it feels like the vibes on it have gone way south, and not just because of the actress. But
That's good to hear.
mm, certainly, I think it would, if it were to win, it would really put to the test my current feeling that Crash is the worst best picture winner. But anyway, hopefully that won't be an issue. So, with that, then, do you want to jump over to best animated feature?
Yes,
All right. Um, so, Inside Out 2 is certainly the one that's been out longer. Do we want to jump on that one first?
that works.
All right. Obviously, I think most people are aware of this one at least. You know, it's Pixar. It's a sequel to another big Pixar movie. You know, Riley is becoming a teen and has to get all sorts of new emotions to fight for control within her little headspace. And it becomes like the fifth animated movie in 2 years to have a depiction of a panic attack in it. Which I'm not saying it shouldn't do. It just has become a weird trend. um, so I know that you really liked this one. Tell you know, speak on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just really liked Inside Out. I thought it was fun and creative and yet really touching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just a super heartwarming tale of, like, kind of what it feels like to have a battle of emotions. But it was you didn't reflect on it at the time of like how it's very simplistic, obviously, because it's a child's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's you just kind of enjoy the ride. But then when they come and they're going to introduce and say, okay, well, now this child is growing into a teenager and these emotions are going to become more complex. There's going to be different emotions in here that weren't present before,
Mm-hmm.
that are going to be, you know, looking for approval or control or all these types of things. And you know, it the fact that they were able to still nail kind of the crux of what they were trying to do, which is give this sort of purity to kind of all these combating things that happen inside of a human being
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, uh, while taking the story to the next level of like teenage years, and then telling a real story like on the outside too. Like, I think that's trickier than you
Mm-hmm.
kind of think, right? Is like to have this, okay, yeah, we're dealing with what this inside emotional like struggle feels like, and how these work within you and how that reflects, but then to tell a story of what the outside effects are as a teenager, with the fact that you could be going to different schools, you could be different skill levels in your sport
Mm-hmm.
with your best friends, and you could be looking for approval from the cool person when your friends maybe aren't cool, and like all these actual conflicting outside events that people deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So to tell a story that works on both the inside and the outside, like, joke Inside Out, right? At a
Mm-hmm.
level that's much more complicated than just a child, is, I thought, was just genius, right? Like, and made me, and it was fun to watch in addition to all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was a fun time. It had good funny pieces to it. It had emotional pieces to it. It was heartwarming. It was heartbreaking at
Mm-hmm.
times. Think about some of the stuff that, like,
Yeah.
You know, wow, like because it doesn't ever get a cheap thing of like, oh wow, she was being really shitty to her friends, but that's because like this emotion took over and the cool kids or whatever. Like
Hmm.
it's nuanced enough to understand like she doesn't want to be shitty to her friends.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Like,
yeah. So I think that, like, I really like this one too. I will say that I think the first one hit me harder than this one did, which is not like a criticism of this one. I think to some extent it's just going to be, it's dealing with a slightly different color palette, so to speak, of what emotions it's exploring and what sort of story it's telling, right? And I think that the simplicity of the first one sort of just like hit me more than this one, which is not, again, a criticism of the new one, which
mhm,
I think does a good job telling a more complex story. Um, I think that it really did a great job, I thought, of having anxiety be a nuanced character, like to recognize, we have this tendency to only talk about or think about anxiety in the negative sense of people when they're feeling stressed out about, everything, right? Like perpetual anxiety, or even like this idea that you're worrying about things that you shouldn't worry about, right? But it is important psychologically to understand that anxiety is actually an important survival emotion, right? It is this, like, one of the reasons that humans evolved the way we did is because we have developed the ability to say, "Oh, a bunch of tall grass over there. What if there was a tiger hiding in it? Maybe I'll go the other way." Right? The ability to consider the possibility of a future problem and then take steps to avoid it is very important. It's you need to be able to do that. And that's kind of that same anxiety impulse. But of course, in much the same way in the first one, like Joy can't do everything, right?
right.
And so if Joy tries to do everything, it goes wrong. And same with anxiety. Anxiety is very useful in a number of ways, but you can't give it complete control over everything, because then, it's like you were saying, like Riley being shitty to her friends. The logic from anxiety's perspective is, well, we already know we're going to lose them. So we need to focus on the new friends, and we need to do everything we can over there and ignore, like writing off them as lost. Yes, it's very sad, but we're off on this new thing now. And I like that all of the emotions, like especially our five like original ones, um, all get to have their own complexity in them. Like they're not just one note, which
Yep.
is an interesting development from, following on from the end of the first movie, where they've recognized now that they're that they can be more complex than that. I like that even though anxiety is kind of the proactive antagonist in this story, even though she has her sympathetic angle to it, we also have Joy once again recognizing that what she's been doing by repressing everything that doesn't fit this perfect viewpoint is also bad. And so, like, you can't do either of those things, and it's, but at the same time of, yeah, like them recognizing it all together, I think there's lots of fun stuff. I think that the imagery of that final panic attack sequence, like not even so much the stuff about outside with Riley, but just the imagery of anxiety moving so fast that she appears to be frozen, like that's just a cool scene. And that is where finally, like we get to really see her realizing how out of control it's gotten, and all of the others able to kind of come together to fix it. And um, And it is interesting too. I'm glad you kind of called it out that like this one has a lot more Riley stuff than the first one did. Because the first one, everything that Riley's doing on the outside is almost like just the weather,
Right.
right? You know, it's what is happening that they have to react to inside. Um, but this one has to do a lot more complex stuff in order to kind of justify and motivate the more complex emotions that she's got going now.
Right, because she's got a lot more agency in her
Mm-hmm.
universe right now.
Yeah.
So when the certain emotions do certain things, like there is a tangible effect on the outcome, you
Mm-hmm.
know, not just how she feels, but
Right.
like happens to other people when she these things happen,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Well, and then the whole this idea, this core identity of like who are you, you know, deep down, and you know she's of course at that perfect age to really have that starting to form, but also struggling with it. And
Hmm.
you know this idea of I'm a good person that is largely based on not ever having any spending any time thinking about anything that challenges it. Um, and then of course when anxiety has taken control, it being like I'm not good enough. Uh, that's obviously bad. But then like from there, it's like when you unrepress everything, it's like well what is it? It's like gosh, it's like a really real person that has all sorts of
Right.
complex feelings and have to figure out how to muddle through. And you don't fix the negative things if you just never think about them.
Right. You can be a good person who has made bad choices or who
Mm-hmm.
has experienced sadness or who does sometimes feel not good enough. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love that part where when Joy, I think, is the one that kind of eventually does it, where she just starts like taking and saying like, no, like you're part of this, you're part of the core
Mm-hmm.
identity too, you're part of it, like you're all Riley,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it's because of course, like they all get sent out to the distant, repressed part where where she had been sending all of those emotions, right? And so you know, coming back brings all of that back too. And I think these movies do just have some really fun ways of accessibly depicting complex psychological concepts. So yeah, like I said, I think I might still love the first one a little bit more, but this one is certainly very good. I liked it a lot, and I think that for some people, it will probably like feel even more personal than the first one did. Um, I think maybe just because I've, over the course of my life, already kind of done a lot of work on anxiety related stuff. I feel like I've got it a little bit more internalized, and so I didn't like need to feel seen in it in quite the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then again, like for someone who's really struggling with that right now, I could imagine this just like hitting like a truck. But in any case, um, I think I don't. I've now seen all five of the best animated feature nominations, and I think Pixar has kind of long been sort of like the heavyweight in this category. I I don't know if it will win this time. We'll see. I don't know that there's a specific one that I think is the obvious contender, but there's some other good movies in there. Do you want to talk about one of the other ones? Flow in
Low.
particular, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so Flow is nominated both in Best Animated Feature and in Best International Feature because it is the entry from Latvia. And as we had touched on in a previous update, it is a dialogue free story of a bunch of animals trying to survive a big flood in an apparently post human world. Um, because we certainly see evidence of humans having once existed, but none of them, you know, in the movie.
Right.
Um, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I liked it. It was took me a little bit to get into it because the animals are so well drawn as animal representations, like not
Hmm.
whatever it's, I can't,
Anthropomorphize. Hmm.
anthropomorphic, yeah. That one of my dogs who reacts to animals on screen, it like took me a while to like get him to chill.
Mm.
Um, but he eventually did. So I was able to get into it. But yeah, like it. Once I kind of got into it, I really did like it too. I thought that it did a really good. I mean, it was very beautiful looking.
Hmm.
I thought the choice of having the cat as a protagonist was a great selection, right?
Hmm.
Because he's with me. Here he goes.
Yeah.
Um,
The animals in our lives.
yes,
Hmm.
was because it used the fact that, like, again, talking about anxiety, like cats tend to display more what we would consider anxiety, right?
Hmm.
And so to watch him grow through the movie of
Hmm.
being the scaredy cat to, okay, like I'm a little wary, but then, like, as
Hmm.
the group builds trust, like it's really telling like a true story of like how a group of anybody forms,
Hmm.
right? Like there's the nervousness and the anxiousness at the beginning, a little bit of lack of trust, like,
Hmm.
okay, like, well, I'm familiar with you, so I can be around you, but I'm not necessarily like ready to go all the way with you,
Hmm.
you know, in the trust thing. And then, oh, well, you can do something that I can't. Maybe you could help. Maybe now I'm getting some confidence that, okay, well, if it can be done, I saw you do it. Like when the swimming thing is what I'm
Hmm.
talking about. He sees is it a capybara or something?
Yeah, it's an interesting collection of animals because of course we've got a cat and then later there are some dogs, but then there's also a capybara which live in South America and then there's also a lemur which lives in Madagascar. So and then I don't know what kind of bird the big bird is, but actually let me look it up. I think I maybe remember hearing that it was a secretary bird. But yeah, so it's oddly enough, just searching the word flow doesn't automatically get you the movie. Let's see. Yep, it's a so the bird. There's one major one, and then we see a bunch of others of them that are apparently secretary birds. I wonder where they're from. But it's interesting, I think, because you mentioned like that they weren't visually they are portrayed like specifically as animals, right? Like they don't have like human features. They're a little bit cartoony, but by and large, they are being depicted like just an animal, and they don't talk. Certainly, over the course of the movie, I think we see them demonstrating probably a higher level of self awareness and awareness of the thoughts and intentions of the other animals, probably more so than real animals would or could. But that just kind of allows us to have they can build a little bit of character to them, even though there's no dialogue. But yeah, by like they're never just people, cat flavored people or dog flavored people. It's just they're doing their animal things.
Yeah, and what I thought they did a good job of, though, was giving them interactions and kind of things that you could relate to how people would do,
Hmm.
but like leaning more heavily into like sort of the brand of that animal, right?
Hmm.
Like the lemur and like sort of his like weird collecting thing and
Hmm.
hoarding thing. Like,
Yeah. Like the animals all kind of fall into archetypes that we could imagine a human playing.
right. But they're able to be almost like a little bit exaggerated because
Hmm.
they like, at the beginning at least, right? When they're leaning into their very like animal thing,
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
so.
The capybara is just like incredibly chill and relaxed about everything. Just very much like capybaras seem like they are just always very serene. You know,
Yeah.
the classic images of like them in the little hot springs or whatever. Um, and then you know
Yeah, the
we've got
bird is very
hmm?
stoic, and the bird is very stoic and
Yeah,
kind of like,
standoffish, but you know we can tell that there's maybe like at first they're scary, right? Like the cat is like you know like probably of all of the animals that the cat acts scared of, the bird is probably like that's no like that's very reasonable. That's you should be scared. But it becomes clear that this bird in particular, even if the other birds are not sharing the sentiment, this particular bird seems to have some degree of cool affection for the cat.
well, and that's a theme that runs across a couple of the animals
Mm-hmm.
as well, where it's like once you get them out of their, kind of click,
Mm-hmm.
that's when they start to mold. That's where how they can mold more into the more
Right.
diverse. Like the dog is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like he he's always kind of the goofy, like tail wagging Labrador, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's with the other ones, then it's,
Right.
and that's why I made you the joke of like, oh, is the message of the movie that like dogs are idiots or dogs are bad or
Yeah.
whatever? But what the reality, what it kind of set in was, is like, no, when they're grouped together and they're kind of being a clique and they're
Mm-hmm.
all kind of being goofy and distracted,
Right.
then they all get like that. But when you remove him and put him with the other group, he doesn't change who he is,
Right.
but he kind
The
of
like
morphs more into the group.
the
Yeah.
dynamic of a pack of dogs starts becoming its own dynamic instead of a, assimilating to the rest of the animal group.
Right. But I love that they didn't make him less kind of doggy like,
Mm-hmm.
right? He just, like your point, he assimilated more to the group without losing his character.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very clever. you
Mm-hmm.
know.
And so for anyone who hasn't like checked this out yet, I can imagine the thought of like, so it's a bunch of animals and there's no dialogue. Like, how long is this movie, right? And feeling like, how can you really sustain a whole movie like this? Well, let me tell you, you can. It does it exceptionally well. I might have also been skeptical, except for just having heard other people make the same assurance. It is very beautiful visually. The story and the characters and the arcs are very comprehensible, even without dialogue. And it has a story to tell with a beginning, middle, and end, and it works. It's good.
I liked it.
Yeah. So I think if I were going to put money down on something other than Inside Out 2, I would probably put it on Flow. Partly just because it's kind of like it's a change of pace. It's a different sort of thing than
Yeah.
we're used to in this category. Um, just to compare so I've now seen all five. The other three nominees are The Wild Robot, which I think has some fantastic stuff in it, but the story overall kind of is a little bit muddled. Like it's kind of just it feels a little bit like they had five different versions of the third act and kind of just went with a mush of all of them. Um, but it's got some great stuff in it, and then it just kind of starts to feel a little like, wait, what is this? Like, what are the stakes here? How are we supposed to feel about these people? Like towards the end, but it's still very good. I think it's worth watching. Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. I love Wallace and Gromit. I'm always there to see Wallace and Gromit. I will say I don't think this one is as good as Curse of the Were Rabbit, which I adore, but that almost might just be like a genre preference because I kind of loved the horror pastiche of that one, and then this one's a little bit more like heisty sort of stuff. But it's fantastic, and if you like Wallace and Gromit, you should see this one because it's more Wallace and Gromit. It's great.
Yeah.
And then Memoir of a
They're
Snail.
one of those
Hmm?
ones of the perennial, like, we're just always going to get nominated. Have they won one yet?
I don't think so. Let's see. Aardman is the So I mean, Curse of the Were Rabbit is the only other feature film they've done. Um,
Okay, so they must have been
but they've
nominated for
done
like
a bunch of
four.
shorts. Oh, I think it maybe did win for Curse of the Were Rabbit the year that came out. Um, let's see. Um, yes, so when Curse of the Were Rabbit came out, it did win the Best Animated Feature that year.
Okay, it did. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and so, but like most of the Wallace and Gromit um, films are shorts, but you know, people should watch them. They're fantastic. I don't think any of the other Aardman films, because there's like Shaun the Sheep and Missing Link and Chicken Run, and I guess there was a new Chicken Run this year. I didn't actually even see it. That have like done okay, but not at the same level necessarily. But very good. Memoir of a Snail is the one I just saw since this last update. It's a claymation movie. Um, it's it's very different from what folks might normally expect from an animated movie, even like one that looks like this, because it's actually telling a pretty sad story about a young woman as she's growing up. The title comes from first the fact just that this character has always kind of had a real affection for and love of snails, but also it's kind of a metaphor for the way that like the various traumas that she suffers and sad things that happen to her kind of train her over time to just like whenever she's stressed, she sort of just retreats into a metaphorical shell, right? And that's kind of part of what's going on. But a lot of the story is I mean, it is not like a light, fun, silly movie. It's a sad story with ultimately like there's some uplifting stuff at the end, although I think in some ways it feels almost a little bit jarring. Like the sad stuff feels kind of so grounded and real that like by the time things start to turn around, that almost feels like it would have to be fantasy. But like so it's good. I don't think it's going to win because it's just very strange. Um but yeah, so but Flow, like Inside Out 2 is kind of like that's an obvious one, right? Like people love Pixar, and it's not that it's not great, but it's sort of just like it's it's the one that's like what we usually think of winning. But then Flow is the one that's kind of like, well, it's from another country, doesn't even have any dialogue to it. Like I think all of that, so we'll see how that goes, but I think
Yep.
they're both very good. So I think that's all of the movies that we've now both seen in common. I will just jump in. I've now seen all of the Best Picture nominees as well. I think the two that I hadn't yet seen when we last talked about it were I'm Still Here and Nickel Boys. Both are excellent. I think people should try to go see them. I'm Still Here is a Brazilian film about living under the military dictatorship of Brazil in the 1970s. It feels timely, but it's about this woman whose husband basically gets like taken in for questioning by the secret police, and what do you do? How do you try to what do you do from there? Like she's got her kids to take care of, but she's hoping to see if she can find him. And it's based on a true story as well. And it's really it's again it's like it's a hard watch, but it's very good. And Nickel Boys has kind of a gimmick to it, but when I use that word, I want to emphasize when I say the word gimmick, I don't automatically imply that that's a pejorative connotation. Like I just know that I've had a couple of conversations where people where as soon as I say the word gimmick, they're saying, "But it worked so well," and I'm like, "Well, it being a gimmick doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Like it's an effective gimmick, but the gimmick is that it is all in first person." We are occasionally switching POV between two different characters, but every shot we see is basically from the eyes perspective of one of these two characters. And it's about these two kids who find themselves involved with some of the juvenile correctional camps back in like the 60s. And so obviously, like, that's not an especially like happy story either, but it is very well told. And I think, you know, the first person stuff is incredibly well used in some has some really remarkable sequences. I think it's used to further the storytelling. Um, but I mean, it's also true that people are talking about this movie more than they would have if it wasn't made in first person. It is a gimmick. Like that does it's not a bad thing for it to be a gimmick. It's just like a gimmick is just like it's, you know, you've done something in a specific way in order to attract more attention to it. Like, that's not inherently wrong or bad. It's used very effectively. But I think overall, having now seen all 10 of the Best Picture nominees, I definitely don't want Emilia Perez to win. I feel like I could really kind of be okay with almost any of the others winning. Like, I I think they all had stuff that I really liked about them. I think probably a complete unknown I would also put towards the bottom of that list, but way above Emilia Perez still. Um, but yeah, I thought there was a, you know, do you have a front runner of the ones that you've seen?
I've seen.
Conclave, Dune Part Two, Emilia Perez, The Substance, Wicked.
My favorite of the ones I've seen is probably Wicked.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a front runner, but
Yeah, I mean, it's got some juice. It's certainly a crowd pleaser.
yeah.
Um, it has the benefit of having come out more recently than many of them, which is sometimes an advantage.
Yeah, and I've also probably, in hindsight, I've probably started to soften on Conclave a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I find myself now reflecting more on like some of the more intricate like setup and not just being frustrated by the kind of
Hmm.
like, oh, here's our crazy
Ending
end. See
endings
ya.
are important. It's hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's always been true about movies that like you can have like, a great first 80%, but then if the ending is bad, you still come out saying it's bad. Or you could have a movie that's not that great, but then builds to something really spectacular. You're going to come out saying that was great, right? It's like the ending is important.
So, on a just very quick aside,
Hmm.
we kind of talked about Cobra Kai, which I know is totally different from this,
Sure.
but talk about a show that just lands the ending.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
I had heard some people criticizing it, but I steadfastly
What?
avoided any details because I plan to watch it and I don't want to be spoiled. So,
Oh no. Gosh, I thought it I don't know that it could have ended more perfectly.
okay.
It was great. Yeah.
All right, good. Well, I need to get back to it. I think I'm 2 seasons behind at this point, but yeah. So there's a lot of good TV these days too. Like I'm watching The Pit on Max, which is a medical drama with Noah Wiley from ER in it, where
Yep.
um, Severance. Anyway, though, those are not Oscar movies. The one last Best Picture thing that I'll say is I will just once again ask people to watch Challengers because that was my actual favorite movie of last year, and it didn't get nominated for anything, which sucks. So I'm gonna just continue to be a Challengers booster. Gosh, that actually sounded just made me think of the Challenger space shuttle. It was
And the boosters.
completely no actual connection other than the word Challenger in it, but still. Anyway, yeah. So I think we're now at the point where I'm about to leave town for a week, and so probably won't be able to watch anything else before the Oscar ceremony, which comes Sunday night, March 2nd. But we'll be back to recap the winners and talk about any of the movies that we might have picked up since then. So you've got a week left, everybody. So go out and watch good movies.